Welcome back to another episode of the XRP Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the Clarity Act and what it means for XRP, but also what it means for some other very key assets in the space. And joining me today is going to be Stephen McClurg. He'll be jumping in here in just a second. And if just as a reminder for you guys, if you don't know who Stephen McClurg is, he's been on our show many times. One of the champions over, of course, at Canary Capital, one of the biggest XRP ETFs out there, as well as other products that we'll be talking about today. So stay tuned for all that good stuff. If you are not part of the XRP Podcast tribe, you should be. One of the things I ask for you guys to do, of course, is like and subscribe right here. And I know a lot of you have been listening to this show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening on the audio version, and we try to customize this where the audio listeners can follow along as much as we can, so we'll read more context and things when we're mentioning them, etc. Give us a like over there and give us a little bit of a star rating. Those kind of feedback points are very important for the show, and we'll get right into it today. It's going to be a good one. Let's bring in, of course, none other than Mr. Stephen McClurg. How are you?
Fantastic, Paul. How are you doing?
Nice to see you. We're ready and recording on a Monday, and of course, this is Clarity Act markup week. Doesn't mean we're going to get it passed, but it will give us some indication as to how Clarity Act might actually respond in terms of going through the Senate and the House. A couple of points I wanted to get on. Obviously, with Canary, you guys offer a lot of ETFs, a handful. Let me just bring up your website for everybody, just so they know everything you guys have going on. Let's share that for you guys. And one thing with Stephen, sometimes I don't think he toots his horn well enough. Because you guys have what I think are one of the best group of ETFs out there. Obviously, the XRP ETF, the Marinade and Solana ETF. Obviously, what we're going to be talking about later in the show today is the HBAR ETF and what that's going to look like. And then even Litecoin over there as well. So you guys go through a whole litany of products and services. One of the top companies out there in terms of fund managers. You guys should check out Canary Capital for sure.
All right, Paul. Well, I will toot my own horn for
Okay, do it.
Our XRP ETF is both the first and the largest spot ETF in the US.
There you go.
We're excited about that.
Shebang. That's a good horn toot to start the program today. Hey, I want to get into this topic right here because as we get into the issue of the Clarity Act this week, everybody has been asking, and this has been something that has been on, I think, the top frame of X for quite some while, and that is that does XRP even need the Clarity Act since it has already gone through the legal tribulations and obviously has been deemed a commodity, basically managed over by the CFTC. And that, of course, changes everything because it's one of the few outside of Bitcoin that is in that position. When you look at that position, and then, of course, one of the things that was put out there here recently in reference to Ripple actually responding to this, does XRP even need the Clarity Act? This, of course, came in from a senior exec over at Ripple saying it's after clear regulatory status. It's not really clear. Well, it is clear, I think, to everybody in the market that XRP doesn't really stand much to gain other than the fact that the rest of the market might continue to fly. So if Clarity gets stuck in the weeds, does this even hurt XRP? What's your take?
Look, I don't think the Clarity Act has any bearing on XRP either. The way that we look at it as a commodity. We look at XRP Ledger as financial rails that are sort of independent from, any type of security rules, same as Swift or something like that. So I don't think that this affects them at all. But there are some companies that would likely affect, but yeah, I don't think it has any bearing on things like XRP, HBAR, Bitcoin. Is just simply not affected by it.
So obviously, when we look at Clarity, many people are going, well, what's going to be put into this version? And the big tug of war right now that's happening in DC after this weekend was actually very, very brisk. I had several research interviews where we talked to a lot of our resources in DC. But last week I had a chance to talk with Congressman Warren Davidson, who has been a big proponent of the key things within the Clarity Act. And I think two of the things that we, of course, discussed was the whole issue around private self-custody, and then, of course, the whole issue of what we're going to see right now with just the whole idea of how rewards might be done in terms of stable coins. This was the analysis that we broke down, as well as KYC. Obviously, I think that's a standard, but the yield bottleneck is, I'll zoom in on that for you so you can see it. The yield bottleneck is really kind of the core conflict that is the issue, and it's not a if. Remember, Genius Act passed, and it only applied to issuers. Now, of course, this is, of course, leaving the, I'll call it the loophole, open for third parties, and many of the third parties like Coinbase, DeFi protocols all benefit from this. So the big impact is going to be a lot of these companies that can get and or provide real yield in these platforms. So the banking lobby has basically demanded that they close that loophole as part of the Clarity Act. And this is the issue that Senator Also Brooks came in with the proposal. I think this is a high probability of going through. And mechanism proposal allows for crypto platforms to offer yield, but only if the customer takes a specific action, staking, locking for a term, kind of like a CD, I guess, or using it for payment. So it bans passive yield. So you can't just park money over in USDC or RLUSD and expect to receive assets. This would be a win for the bipartisan appeal because it gives Democrats at least a win, because it basically protects the community banks and a possible deposit flight that everybody's been asking. I put a whole string on Twitter if you guys are listening to this on the audio version of it. And this was the first tweet. The senators from both parties right now are buying into it. At least I think this is going to be the path of least resistance. The real issue is the rationale. And I want to get into that because this is where it gets a little bit dicey. And I want to get your opinion on this, Stephen, because this starts to really separate the winners from the losers. This was the second post that I did, and it was the compromise, because the people that would, I should say, companies that would lose big are companies like Coinbase, Kraken, Gemini, all the centralized exchanges that are not issuers. Do you think that, because there's two things right now, we haven't seen a flight from banks yet. Now, some people would say, well, Clarity hasn't passed. Do you think that consumers, normal investors, would actually go into these exchanges and try to gain yield on stablecoins, or do you think this is just a red herring?
Well, first of all, I personally do that. I mean, I utilize stable coins on platforms to earn a yield while I'm waiting for, this is particularly in my hedge fund. And I will trade out of, say, Bitcoin and hold USDC and earn a yield while I'm waiting. And then I can easily trade it back to buy spot. So I practice this. I enjoy it, but I actually, it pains me to say that I agree with the banking lobbyists right now. From a securities law perspective,
Explain
you should
that.
not be able to get yield off of USDC, Tether, whatever else it is, whether you're a third party or the primary issuer. And the reason why is because there are very clear rules around money market mutual funds. And unless you want to register as a security, if you're holding securities and distributing the yield, you are a security, period. And the reason why, the bank lobbyists are, because they run money market mutual funds and they have to abide by those rules.
Right.
You have two different set of rules. But what I think is going to happen, though, is that there's already a convergence happening where Kraken, Coinbase, soon Gemini, Robinhood, all of these platforms, Schwab, right, you're going to be able to trade spot, and you're going to be able to trade ETFs, and you're going to be able to trade mutual funds, all within a platform. And once that happens, you'll be able to actually go out and buy, you can trade out of your crypto and then instantly buy either a short duration bond ETF that
Yeah.
yields, anywhere from 3 to 5%, or money market mutual fund, or some other low, short duration treasury or bond mutual fund, and still get that yield.
Mhm.
And the reason why Coinbase is upset about this is because they're an investor in Circle, and they get benefit from that, and they get benefit from, holding your USDC
Right.
and issuing a reward for it. It's a moat that they've created. And that's really the only reason, they're acting like the banks right now. They're trying to protect their moat.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I completely disagree with most of the crypto world here that no, these should be registered as securities if you want to distribute the yield of the underlying securities.
Okay, so I am okay. So I can be clear to the audience. I fall in the camp that is kind of in between you and Coinbase, and the only reason that I am a little skeptical is I always look for overreach. Once
Yeah.
that something gets passed in Congress, do they try to go a little bit further? And the thing that I'm mostly defensive about in terms of a defensive position from the industry standpoint is DeFi, because I
Right.
think that's the real place where yield should be generated because it is a risk. Just like a money market to a certain extent, not really, is a risk. But right now, Fidelity's paying money market yields that match up to almost any USDC yields that are paid over at Coinbase. So I agree with you. That would definitely level the playing field. The key thing is keeping the core mechanism intact. And this is the thing that she's talking about, being Senator Alsobrooks. The proposal shifts the regulatory line from who offers yield to how it's earned. So it introduces a friction layer, which would be passive holding versus active participation. Anybody in DeFi is actively participating,
Right.
being able to earn on that. So the passive yield would be the bank shield. That's where the Coinbase Krakens and Geminis lose, I guess, if you want to call it losing. And I think the other scenario is going to probably open up some new products for them where they're going to get into either staking or lockups.
Mhm.
Do you think that would happen? Do you think we'll see more products coming out if we actually see this go through this way?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is I mostly agree with you on the DeFi side of things. The reality is you can take things that are commodities or
Yeah,
non-security, post them, earn a yield, fine. You're it's basically lending and borrowing.
sure.
But once you take something like Tether or USDC, where the underlying is securities, you're essentially posting securities because you're doing direct, you're doing indirectly what you can't do directly. And if you post something where the underlying is a security and you're earning a yield on it from lending or borrowing activities, that's repo. So
Interesting.
you're essentially have created a decentralized repo finance program. And again, they should be registered as securities if you want the ability to do that. Anything that's not a security, fine. But I do view USDC and Tether as essentially a security. And I think that they need to be locked down a little bit more, And
Really?
I hate to say that because I want to see innovation, but
Yeah.
we do have very clear securities laws.
Well, the likelihood is this third point I made in the tweet here was that I think they're going based on the sources that I'm hearing from in DC is they're going to do a carve out for
Right.
DeFi and self custody, which would be a true non-custodial DeFi protocols. So that I think would be acceptable to the industry. It's probably going to end up doing some things that would be winners for projects like Flare Networks, Axelar, maybe even XRP and RLUSD and ETH in general. If you look at how those ecosystems are built, but it definitely would be interesting between now and the 15th. Here we are, just 3 days away now as we record this, to see if DeFi gets excluded. Do you think that the Congress will try to include DeFi in this act?
I think it's a coin toss. There's probably not enough people that understand DeFi in
Understand it?
Congress.
Yeah.
So it's basically going to be what their lobbyists tell them to do. So if you're, controlled by the crypto lobbyist or the banking lobbyist, we'll see what happens. But I
Yeah.
do think that the banking lobbyists probably have a little bit more power here.
Well, and you're right. I mean, we talked to the DeFi Education Foundation last week, and she was talking to us, Amanda Timonelli. She kind of hit on this topic that I'm showing right here on the story, is that this is the anti-DeFi group, that meaning anti-DeFi in Clarity. They don't want DeFi involved in that. And the real question for this is because it opens up the can of worms of where developers are part of this. It's kind of like the Tornado Cash issue. You're writing code and you're getting blamed for how somebody is using that code. So that, I think, is going to be the challenge, I think, that they'll face, at least in terms of Congress being able to sit down and understand what it means and whether or not it's going to actually be done. So I don't know. I'm still questioning. I don't think they should put it in there, only because it will muddy the waters. If they take away the
I
yield,
agree with you.
yeah, if
Bad
they take away the
legislation is better
yield,
than legislation.
yeah, if they take away yield from a third parties such as Coinbase, I mean, unfortunately, I feel like the normie will lose, because the person who's not ready to go into DeFi will never experience those kinds of yields. Now, that is a risk in itself, just going into DeFi. So that's where I think maybe it will accelerate adoption. Do you think adoption will pick up any at all?
Well, look, I mean, I think I, th- I don't know if the normie will necessarily lose, first of all, because there are other options. Again, with Coinbase opening up their platform for securities, with Robinhood already doing it,
Yeah.
you do have access to yielding products while you're waiting now, and that didn't exist a year ago.
Well, Robinhood is yielding on US dollars.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, you trade out of your crypto and you just yield off of US dollars, yield off of mutual funds. So that does exist now, and it didn't exist a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
So I think that the landscape is changing quite a bit, so that you're not really disadvantaging anyone at this point. But I am for um, technological developments, and if you restrict too much, I'm going to agree with you here. Even though, you know, there are rules. There's got to be a sandbox,
Sure.
regulatory sandbox that people can experiment in and not get their hands slapped too much. And maybe this is it. Maybe leaving. You may have convinced me. Maybe leaving DeFi out for the moment
Yeah.
is a good thing, because look, the future of DeFi is actually excellent. As former
Oh,
bond
it's
trader,
huge.
I would have loved to have a decentralized platform where I can trade bonds, where I can engage in repo transactions. It makes things so much easier. But
Mhm.
I do think we're a little far away from that, and I think the technology needs to be developed a little bit better.
Well, you kind of mentioned this story in the issue of Coinbase warning that it's going to pull support for Clarity. And,
Yeah.
and it's all based on the whole issue of the yield, because this would be an issue. If it pulls support, do you think Coinbase's lobby is powerful enough to impact some of these votes? Because
Look,
now
their
it's a
lobby is
lobby versus lobby.
I mean, their lobby is extremely powerful when it comes to most things, but when it comes to this, nobody cares.
Really?
I
Okay.
mean,
Well,
the
there.
banking lobbyists are way more powerful
So you feel the banking lobby pushback is going to win on this one, Stephen?
all day.
Okay. Well, there you guys have it. The opposition to stablecoin rewards now has been led by the American Bankers Association, and this will eat up your yield in centralized exchanges. So just, you heard it right there from the McClurg. I'm going to start calling him the McClurg on his predictions that it's going to happen this way. So,
We'll
ooh.
see. I've been wrong before.
Well, we will know on the 15th of what that markup looks like. And I imagine we're going to get some drafts of the bill before then. So the likelihood is, and of course, the rules in DC, the amount of negotiation that is done outside the chambers that is insane. And I know with the people we talk to that are kind of behind the scenes as our sources, a lot of aides and support staff that are kind of saying, all right, we have this senator locked in. We think that we're going to need 2 more votes. And I think that's the issue right now. Let's talk about what benefits. All right, let's assume we get through Clarity and the yield issue which is the rub right now, gets resolved, and the banking industry gets their way. Centralized exchanges lose it. DeFi is excluded. Where do you think tokens win on the backside of Clarity?
Well, I think the ones that don't really, where it really doesn't even matter, right? So, I mean, first of all, Coinbase is going to win no matter what. They're right now they have the advantage
Yeah,
on USDC, but
Mhm.
again, they're simply going to switch over to offering mutual funds that do the same thing.
yeah,
But they don't have the clear moat there, which is why they're upset. As far as tokens go, I mean, probably XRP is going to be the biggest beneficiary, they're going to be the biggest beneficiary regardless of what happens, because the XRP ledger is simply going to power a lot of the activity that we're talking about, right?
yeah.
So, and given where Ripple stands in the companies that they've acquired, they easily have the ability to also create a security product
Mhm.
that would compete with stable coins on their own ledger. And it wouldn't shock me if they did something like that. They created their
Interesting.
own money market mutual fund that's running on XRPL and providing, whatever yield they can get out of it, which at the moment is probably around 4%.
Yeah. Which would literally go head to head with current money markets, which you could get at Fidelity or any, traditional broker out there. Do you think that is the future of these yield products right now, Stephen? Or do you feel like there will be a transition period where we'll see new products coming out because of the Clarity Act from Coinbase, Kraken, et cetera?
Well, let's assume that I'm right in my prediction on the Clarity Act for a moment. If I'm right, then yes, you will absolutely see new products coming out that you can transact on, that are securities that are offered to others.
Yeah.
For instance, you know a, a closed-end fund, um, you know a closed-end mutual fund is available to both accredited and non-accredited investors,
Right.
and it doesn't necessarily have to trade on an exchange. It can trade as, it can have a transfer agent that is a blockchain, and it can trade really on any platform
Interesting.
as long as it's registered. And it wouldn't shock me if we saw, these closed-ended mutual funds start coming out on the ledger. Same thing with open-ended mutual funds too. They're just a little bit harder to deal with on a DeFi space.
Mhm. What about Solana? Obviously, ETH, we kind of already kind of have a good idea of why it would benefit. But what about Solana? Do you feel like it would have some benefit on Clarity, at least in the state that we're talking about?
I think it would have some, probably ETH to a lesser extent. And the reason why I say that, because I like both of those chains for what they do.
Mm.
But when it comes to financial products, I just don't believe that Solana is quite there yet. ETH is too far away. The problem with ETH is it's too slow and expensive.
Yeah.
And but XRPL is probably, for what it is, it's the most suitable for financial products.
Well, and it's also the most accepted right now to a certain extent, I think, from the, institutional side, which is probably going to end up being very active on trading this. What about the whole point of, because this is something that our shows and channels are a little bit different because we're kind of a mix between finance, tech, and crypto. And our audience base has been growing exponentially. But when you look at crypto in general, and I even was tweeting with the ex engineer that runs the algorithm this weekend, and we were kind of going back and forth on the whole issue of crypto X, and that they've actually started to reduce reach of
Mhm.
crypto on X to talk about this. So, and I know they're getting ready to launch some new products we'll talk in about a minute, but do you believe that we are in a phase now where traditional finance has kind of taken over when it comes to blockchain and crypto?
It really has. And you can see it on X, you can see it on other channels where, I hate to say it like this, but a lot of the kind of the old guard, very specific token influencers are
Yeah.
starting to just lose a voice. People don't care anymore. They want to hear what Larry Fink has to say.
Right.
And because they're the ones that are, they're the ones that own, let's just talk about Bitcoin for a moment. BlackRock has the largest Bitcoin ETF. They matter, right?
Yeah.
Fidelity, they matter. Not a lot of other people do. And so there's a shift occurring away from sort of like the micro influencers to the large, financial firms to see what's going to happen next, because their actions are the ones that matter more at the moment. I hate to say it that way, but it's just the way it is. Everybody wanted the institutions to come, and here they are.
Here they are. Yeah.
And now they're the ones who run the show.
Well, and it's funny too, because, our numbers started exploding in 2024, it was the August and September of 2024. Both channels started just going like crazy. And when we were analyzing it, Stephen, the growth was coming from not crypto people, but regular investors that were coming to learn about crypto. And it seems like there is a massive audience for traditional investors who are now just getting into blockchain, but their expectations are different. They don't have an expectation of betting on a meme token and doing 100x. Their expectations are learning about XRP, HBAR, Stellar, ETH, Solana, all the top 20 tokens,
Right.
and trying to figure out how do they micromanage against that. Do you see that in the market as well?
Oh, absolutely. And, and there's a handful of, like yourself, that even though you have a focus on crypto, you come from a more traditional background.
Yeah.
So you have that trust. So people will come to you because you're not just talking about, hey, this is my pet project token. I've got all my bags here.
Right.
I'm going to pump this as much as I can. People know the difference, right? So, so there's a handful of shows and personalities where people come to and trust from the traditional markets to learn, because they know that you can relate to them as well, and you can relate it to. But I'm definitely seeing that, where there's sort of a drop off in the ones that are very tribalistic, very crypto focused, as far as
and it's all an era, it's like, if you look back at the early stage of tech, it kind of had that as well. You look at the early stage. I was around in 2007 when X, or Twitter, launched, and when it came out of Audio, which was its original form, which was a podcasting platform, by the way, if you guys don't know history on Twitter. And I remember the top 100 Twitter accounts were mostly tech influencers. Okay. At that time, I mean, I remember Leo Laporte from, This Week in Tech podcast was like number 1 or 2. Those micro influencers eventually seeded to all of the primary, investment groups, tech companies, etc. And it may be happening I think in finance and crypto right now for sure. So what do you make of this right here? Because this is something that X is talking about over the weekend, and they're going to drop in these new smart cash tags. And many people say, well, this might give crypto a little more life on the algorithm, which would expose it to more eyeballs. Or I think it might shut it down, because in the sense that it's going to bring in cash tags in general. This was from Nikita Buyer, who is doing it. These are the smart cash tags. It's actually going to show the reference to what's going on the chart, and you'll be able to actually, what it looks to be, sell and buy inside of X. What about this?
Yeah. Well, look, I'm neutral, whether it hurts or helps crypto. I do think it's neutral. But what I'm seeing happening, and I'm sure you're seeing this too, is that X is becoming what Elon always wanted it to be, and that is a trading platform. It's going to be a transaction platform. So you're not only transacting in opinions and words, but you're also transacting in money, and crypto's a part of that. So it wouldn't surprise me, by the way, if it goes even further, and X also has prediction markets on it. So
For sure.
yeah. And because that's where most retail liquidity is moving is prediction markets.
Yeah.
They're not using crypto to bet on whether the Fed is going to raise rates or lower rates next month. They're just going to Kalsi to make those predictions. It's a lot cleaner.
Well, and you've got to, you got to look at that, because I think the issue right now, especially when you think about what's happening in the market right now, we'll just go over to Polymarket right now just to give you, most of you I think of all of you guys have probably already tracked what's going on in terms of the Fed decisions for January. Are you still on the point of of a pause in January?
I think there's going to be a pause. I think after this weekend, Jerome Powell's just going to dig his heels in and refuse to do anything that the president wants him to do.
Yeah. I'm assuming when you say this weekend, you're talking about the federal investigation on
That's exactly
Barron.
right.
Okay. Yeah, that was a little bit of a startle on Sunday. I open up my X account, of course, and see that Department of Justice is going after the chair of the Fed for exaggerating on the renovation.
Exactly.
Which is crazy. But anyway, right now it looks like it's still holding at 95% for no change, 25 on that. When you look into March, this is still starting to climb on a no change. So it's possible we may not get a shift until after Powell is gone. Do you think he's made his last rate change?
Well, I thought we would get another rate cut in January, March until this weekend. So yes,
Yeah.
I think
That's it.
He's dug his
So-
feet in. He's going to do what benefits his masters, which is the banks.
Yeah.
Because the Fed's not independent. Even that's just rhetoric. They are controlled by the banks, who's also ultimately involved with the Senate Banking Committee, and they're going to do what benefits them. And right now, what benefits the banks isn't lower rates, but it's a larger repo facility, so that the banks can continue to borrow at a decent rate. So you're going to see the Fed's balance sheet continue to climb, since it has since December 1st, and that doesn't really help retail markets.
But Peter, Stephen, how do you combat that? This falling inflation? This is getting, we're under 2% solidly for quite some time, at least on Truflation. Does Powell just simply say, yeah, we're just going to keep pushing?
Yeah, he's going to come up with something. Look, I've been able to predict Fed rate cuts or increases in the last 8 years simply due to politics.
Yeah.
It's been pretty obvious and pretty simple. If there's something to influence an election, then the Fed makes moves, and that's exactly what he's done.
Well, just remember, he did a 50 right before Biden's. And that was completely off guarded. So
yeah, inflation was at 4.5% at the time.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. We were burning on inflation, and jobs were just starting to really hit. And then, of course, we get the 50, which is interesting. I just don't know how this is going to play out. I'm kind of torn, because we're seeing softening on the job, in the sense of the job loss is starting to slow. And now we're seeing this lower inflation by a significant amount. I just wonder if the Fed can come up with a valid, position to not make the move coming up. Let's talk about something you are doing, and that, of course, is the HBAR ETF. So you guys launched this. This is going now. Talk to me about what you guys are trying to do with this.
Yeah, look, I've been a big fan of HBAR and Hedera for a very long time. I love what they're doing on enterprise. I love how the software is built. It's not a true blockchain. A lot of people don't understand that. It's a hashgraph technology, which actually makes it a little faster on the enterprise side. But this was a little over a year ago when we began filing altcoin ETFs, and we initially looked at, we're like, okay, Bitcoin and Ether launched. What what would the SEC approve next? And this
Yeah.
is during the Gary Gensler era. And I remembered the speech by Gensler saying that Bitcoin, ETH, and Litecoin are not securities. I'm like, wait a minute, nobody's filed for a Litecoin ETF,
Right.
so we filed for that. And then if Bitcoin, Litecoin, and ETH are all commodities, the way that Hedera was launched and positioned itself, it actually filed as a commodity, and to my knowledge, it was the only protocol to do that.
Okay.
And you can thank Brian Brooks for that early action. And I was like, okay, well, if Gensler said that Litecoin's not a security, and here's all the reasons why as well, then Hedera isn't a security as either. It's clearly a commodity. It's even registered as a commodity. So we filed for the two of those. And anyway, long story short, you get back to to today, and again, just like I said earlier, we're on XRP. We're the first spot Hedera ETF, and we're also now the largest in the world. So we're very, very proud of those things. We're very excited for what we've done here. And look, I'm particularly excited about the AUM that we've raised, because that's, we're in a for-profit business, so I care about that. But yeah, just right out of the gate, Hedera was top 10 ETF launch of 2025.
That's huge, considering, it because it hasn't been on, I think, the forefront of the crypto sphere. But what I'm finding is that, you just look at the performance of XRP. If you look in the crypto sphere, a lot of people push back on that, but yet at the same time, the performance of the ETFs have shown already that, traditional capital and institutional capital clearly picking certain winners out there. So, and it's just the beginning, Stephen. So this is
Yeah.
this is going to get really intriguing. Of course, if you guys haven't visited the Hedera.com site and the foundation, you can learn a lot more about what they're doing over there. Their governance is one of the things that I am interested in, because if you look at their council participation, which has been pretty significant over the years, we've featured a lot of them, and they continue to get, I think, some of the best people out there. What do you think will happen if we start to see an absolute rock star? I mean, they've already got the likes of Dell and many others on this council. What do you think if someone like, I don't know, like an Amazon or someone major in the tech community were to jump into this ecosystem?
Well, look, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that something like that happens very soon. And what's great about both this ecosystem and Hedera itself, is that it's got a lot of usage and a lot of eyeballs on it from large enterprise companies. Like, I mean, most of the people that I know that follow Hedera aren't crypto people, like you said. It's developers at Oracle, it's developers at Intel.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually how I heard about it. Because I knew some developers at Intel, and that's all they could talk about. It's like, I haven't even heard of this thing. So then I looked into it and was like, okay, yeah, this is actually quite interesting. I see why you like it. It doesn't have the typical hype, that a lot of other protocols have when they come out. They've got massive marketing teams. It's just all, no, we're connecting with enterprise solutions. We're connecting with, real companies out there and developing real use cases for that community. And it's fantastic technology.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's one of those that kind of circles in that utility layer that RLUSD, XRP, Stellar to a certain extent all participate in. And I think that's something that we'll continue to see as one of the core tenets of why institutional capital and for the broader markets are starting to look at these projects. Because I think even Bitcoin guys have started to look at XRP in a different way.
That's right.
Which is surprising to me, considering how tribal Bitcoin is. But I think people are warming up to a new era in crypto. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about Canary, you can, of course, go over to canaryetfs.com, and you'll learn quickly on the list of ETFs available over there. Of course, the XRP ETF trading under XRPC, and then now with the HBAR trading under HBR. So there you go. This is going to be good to watch. Steve, it's been good having you again. We're gonna come back to these predictions again and see if you're winning. So far, you're doing pretty good on your predictions, by the way. So I'm going to stay with.
As long as you're 51%, right? That's all that
That's
matters.
right. Yeah, as long as you get there, you're fine, and you're a winner. As they say. Listen, if you're 51% in baseball, you're in the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
And so just think of it that way. Anyway, good to see you. Thanks again for coming in on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Paul.
You bet. All right, you guys, you know what to do. Make sure and like and subscribe. If you have not done that already, all you have to do really is just hit the bell down below. That's going to give you notifications when we drop out a new video. And of course, drop a comment. That's another way to, of course, engage with the channel. And we'll see you next time right here on the XRP Podcast. Take care.